It's our final week of class, and I wanted to go over both the sort of end assignment for your final research paper, which the final draft will be due here on Wednesday by 5 p.m., and also for your actual course final, which is your reflective essay, which is going to be due Friday by 5 p.m. So those are two very important dates to keep in mind. There's no wiggle room in these dates at this point because class is rapidly coming to an end, and I actually have to have grades in by Monday. So we'll go over this in just a few minutes, and I'll also talk about kind of the end of course survey that I'd like you guys to take and student evaluations. But the research paper final draft, as I said, Wednesday, July 24th by 5 p.m. is when it's in. I'm not going to be checking Blackboard again or respond to emails until I post grades on Monday because I'm going to be busy grading your essays and you guys are going to be taking other finals or your other summer terms courses. With this in mind, a couple of tips to think about based off of your prospectus and for those of you who actually completed and submitted your research paper first draft. Read aloud your writing to yourself. That's a great editing tip that I highly recommend many of you do. One thing I noted on a lot of papers is that you might have a great claim that you're making in a sentence, but you're not necessarily doing a good job of tying those claims together using transitional words and phrases to kind of build your logic in an essay. That's a really important thing to do for a final draft of a research paper that has your argument. Um, After you've read this aloud and kind of worked on this in the sentence level, think about what your thesis is. That's your overall claim for the essay, what you're trying to talk about, what you're trying to actually argue, what your opinion is. Go ahead and highlight that thesis. You can highlight that in yellow or whatever, and you could turn that in the final draft too. That would make my job easier too. But highlight your thesis where you're doing this to make sure a couple things. Mostly that you're actually making an argument and that you're following that thesis throughout the paper. One big thing that kind of concerns me that I noticed in a lot of your prospectus papers and the first draft is that maybe you have kind of a fine report for what you're going to talk about, but you don't really have an argument about why the claim you're making is important, or in some cases, you don't have a claim. But you make sure that that's clear in your thesis and that you follow that throughout your paper. Okay? So that's the big thing to think about. After you get your sort of sentence level work done and have a thesis with a firm argument and an argument that's carried throughout the paper, you're going to look at documenting the correct format for these papers. I think for virtually everyone, that's APA style format. And again, you can go on the OWL website at Purdue and look up the APA style guideline. One thing I've noted on a lot of papers on your reference pages that many of you are leaving off is the database that you received or you pulled a source from. You have to include the database name. Of course, page numbers, making sure that your margins are set to 1 inch all the way around, all important stuff. And after you have that, one thing I'd highly recommend doing too is going into your introduction and conclusion. When I read an introduction, it should be engaging to your audience. It should make people want to read more. And the conclusion should be more than just something that's simply restating the actual facts of the essay. It should move beyond that and talk about how this problem that you've researched can be solved by maybe your suggestion, or how there needs to be more research into this section. Okay, so those few things are really going to be necessary when you're actually revising this rough draft into your final draft of your research paper. Okay. Also, because of the condensed time frame for this, I do not usually give detailed feedback on the final research paper or your actual final reflective paper. I don't do that because you're not going to have an option to revise these projects because there's no time left in class. If, however, you would like detailed feedback or comments on your final paper, please let me know before via the comment section in the assignment upload portal. That's right when you actually click on to submit your essay, and I'll look at that. Otherwise, you will only receive the evaluation rubric and the final score on Blackboard from me. So make sure to do that if you want comments. Let me back up 1 second. Okay, So after you turn in your research essay on Wednesday, you're going to be moving into your reflective essay. And it is a reflection. You don't necessarily have to cite outside sources other than one artifact, which we'll talk about in a second, which is just a piece of your own writing. But it is a hefty assignment in terms of your grade. It's worth 20%. Um, and that artifact is just one paper and one outcome from the class. And the outcomes are listed on the syllabus. They're also hot linked through the assignment prompt page for the reflective essay. And you can actually use one entire unit instead of a single essay too. You might just go through the whole entire research toolbox and talk about those different sort of test runs that we've done leading up to your research paper and how that was helpful for you too. And though this final reflective essay is a narrative, you still must back up your reflection with solid evidence from your own writing. That means actually, in some cases, citing yourself and quoting yourself and proving how this shows your growth as a writer in the context of this course and in that course outcome. Now, you're not reflecting on your performance in this course, whether you've got an A or a D, that doesn't matter. You're talking about your sort of learning process and what goes in that. Now, with that in mind, you're going to have a theme for this, sort of like a thesis, and it should be sort of connected. It should not be just some sort of musings about class and how hard it is to write or how much you love to write. Okay, you have to have a specific theme for this. And you must refer to specific passages from your chosen written artifacts in your paper. You don't want to use block quotes from your paper, but you might want to cite a thesis if you change that multiple times, like if you're doing the research toolbox, to talk about how that changed over Unit 2, and talk about that in depth in this reflection. And it is due Friday, July the 26th by 5 p.m. No late papers for there either. Okay, a couple things to avoid in your reflective essays and a couple things to sort of work on. Weaker reflective essays do the following. They sort of engage in this glow, which is weak and general claims about the strengths or weaknesses of the course. If you're upset, unhappy about your grade, students usually talk about that, which is not the design of this assignment. The design of this assignment is based upon your actual sort of growth as a writer over the course of this. That's completely, hopefully, divorced from your grade. I know that that's a really hard thing to do. But weak reflective essays also offer little evidence about the artifacts selected to support your claim. They just sort of talk about in general things. They don't actually cite specific evidence from the artifact you're quoting. And they include lots of good or bad evaluative claims about your writing, but again, no specific examples. And finally, the really weak reflective essays write a general narrative about the course rather than your personal experience with writing. If anything I could tell you to do is to keep this essay personal. You want to write in first person since it's a reflection, and you also want to make it, a connection with your audience, talking to them about your journey as a writer. You can actually compare and contrast how this class was to other writing classes that you've had maybe in college. I've had a few students go back to high school and compare and contrast that, but that's kind of a different sort of universe coming back and forth between college writing and high school writing. So there's a lot of different ways you can write your reflection, but it's going to be personal. So it's going to be about you and your growth as a writer during this course. So keep that in mind. Finally, I want to kind of go over some final thoughts that we can leave writing 250 on. There's going to be a short end of course survey that I would like you guys to take. If I set it up correctly, it should be completely anonymous. It's a very simple question that it asks you to do, and it's basically asking you to write a short letter to a future student in class telling them what they can expect from writing 250. You can focus on me, the instructor, the course, the delivery method, online only, has its challenges, of course, as many of you know now. And you can also talk about the summer term. It's a complete list. It should be very short. It shouldn't take you much more than 10 minutes to actually write it and continue that course survey. And after you're done with the end of course survey, please fill out the course and instructor evaluation through My Ole Miss. I do appreciate any comments that you have about the course. If you all have any other questions, please shoot me an email. I'll do my best to answer it. Um, I'll also answer emails right up to the point where you turn in your first essay on Wednesday. Okay? All right, it's been a challenging course, but I think one that's been very rewarding for many of you, and I'm happy to have had you in class.